Welcome to Sanctuary. I hope this sharing brings you relief, hope, and that you feel reflected and know that you're not alone. This quote has been coming up lately. It is, what you now see as challenge or an adversary is the edge of your becoming. Walk to the edge. So a couple weeks ago, on Venus's Day, Friday, I shared my third show and an offer, which I haven't done in years. And 10 years ago, I lived in Boulder with a partner who I thought I would marry. It was the first person I felt in love with. And I thought it very quickly, it was difficult for me. I was unhappy and critical, but because the feeling was there, and I'd been in a lot of other relationships, I was like, it's me. I need to learn to be more unconditionally loving. This is my ego, and I need to make it work. And around that time, I had stopped working at this holistic clinic, and I told myself I would never work for anyone again. And I started a healing business, got a website, and 6 months into it, I'm like, no clients, and I'm not understanding why this isn't working. I've always been like an overachiever. I'm successful, and I thought this is what I was like meant to do. Like, what about the whole follow your bliss and the money will follow? Why isn't this working? And I was unhappy in my relationship with Taylor, and then I also had an art studio that I was like never making art in. I would like go and meditate and cry. So one day, finally, I was like, universe, like, what am I not seeing? Why isn't anything in my life working? And very clearly, I heard because you're not embodying what you're saying you're here to serve, which is like liberation and sovereignty. And I said, okay, well, what's out of alignment? And it's like my relationship with Taylor. Like, I know it's not right, and I'm making myself wrong, and trying to change myself and him. And then so I ended my relationship with Taylor, and we were living together, so I thought I would just move somewhere else in Boulder. But it didn't feel right to be like rushing, and also to be staying in a worse place just because I had less money now that we weren't pooling our resources. And my brother was getting married, and so I thought, you know what? I've been in Boulder 3 years. I love the geography and the land, but I never really got into community because I would get in these intense romantic partnerships. And so I packed up my stuff, gave a lot of things away for free, left some stuff with Taylor, didn't realize how much until recently. And I moved home thinking it would, I'd be home for like a few months until my business took off and I chose the next place I wanted to live. That was 10 years ago, okay? I continued to work on the healing business for like 7 years. And at first I was optimistic, like, it just takes time. Like, it's almost like a test, like, are you gonna believe in yourself and trust spirit? And I started investing for the first time in like private coaches and expensive marketing programs. And I never made money. Like other things were happening. Like I started doing like spoken word poetry, which I never thought I'd do, and performing, and I channeled these myths that ended up being map for my life. I kept doing like more healing programs, like along with the business stuff, because I just felt like, well, something must be wrong with me. Like, other people my parents would say things like, you know how rare it is for someone to like do what they love and actually make money. And it's like, well, even if that were true, like, why not go for it? And yes, I know many people who do similar work that I do that are totally financially sustained by it. So I'm just like, what is in me? And I learned a lot. Like, a lot of it was about intimacy. Business is a relationship like anything else. And I was not really ready. Like, my heart wasn't totally open. And so I didn't live with my parents for the straight 10 years. Like, I lived in Korea, I lived in New York for another man. And I realized this was becoming a pattern, like me moving away, far away from home, my parents, building a whole life, and then kind of like letting it all go, coming back to my parents. And I was like, I want to get to the root of this. Like, I don't want to just be running away. So again, I didn't think it would take 10 years, but why not, right? It takes years and years and lifetimes of programming and conditioning to form what we become. So who cares if it takes months or years to unravel it, and come home to yourself. So I stopped trying. I was like, I'm not going to do any more healing programs or business programs. I was like working part-time at our family deli, beating myself up because I was only working part-time, but I would be exhausted. And like my brother, who has a very different personality, much easier for him to be, he's introverted too, but it's much easier for him to just kind of like be light with people. And for me, I would feel everything and then be like, I'm only working like so many hours a day and not making enough money to actually live on my own, but I'm exhausted, And then I'm like, gosh, am I entitled? Am I lazy? And I was torn because a part of me wanted to really enjoy, I felt like this precious time with my parents. They're getting older, and it's like, if I'm not going to be successful anyway, just like relax and be present. But I couldn't do that because in my mind, I still had this like pressure of, I have to make the business work so that I can, not mooch off my parents and be like successful and actually help them. And then I can have quality time. And I know that's just a trap, right? Like it's only now. And like that thing of like, when I have my shit together, then I will be ready for a relationship. Or when I make money, then I'll feel good about myself. Like, that's not how it works. And yet, it drove me. And then very organically, I realized that I really love transforming homes and turning them into like temples and sanctuaries, like as a way to both process and cleanse the past and also receive the treasure of like really honor what happened, and then to create something new from that foundation. And it's like weeding a garden and composting before you plant new seeds, letting the richness of what's like rotting away feed the next thing instead of just letting it be like dead weight. Yeah, I ended up first doing it to the home I lived in longest, from like when I was 10 years old till 17. And it was this beautiful house on the water that no one in my family like really enjoyed because we were never home. We were all like working, and I was going out and working, and like it was on the water, and everyone else in the community had like a dock and boats, and my uncles would come fish there, and like we never used it. And my parents were selling it, and it oddly wouldn't sell. And it was like, prime location. The real estate market was up. It was a few years ago. And they weren't really like, it wasn't urgent for them to sell it. They thought they would retire there. And I think my dad still had this like dream. It was like the biggest investment that they had. And like, I think a part of him didn't mind having it, even though we weren't using it, because our businesses all ended up being on the western shore of Maryland. This was on the eastern shore. But I ended up staying there a lot when I was home, because it was an empty house, and I would go in, but it was like never because I would only go for a few days, then I have to go back to my parents. It was like, never having like full set of groceries. Like it was on the water. So every time I would go, I'd have to like clean like spider webs and mold, just, yeah, there was, and then by the time I finished cleaning, then I relaxed, it was like time to go back to the other house. And then one day I just realized, like, what am I thinking? Like, I'm in this beautiful fucking house and I'm acting like I'm like Cinderella or something, right? Like there's nowhere else to go. Why don't you just enjoy being here and see cleaning and everything as taking care of something that you love and like my body, and not only tending to it when like an emergency happens. And so I started to see the house as my body, and I started to really I felt gratitude for like how long it housed like my life and my family. Like that's first time I had sex was in my bedroom there. When I found out my father had an affair and my mom was crying like that. So it had a lot of, my brother and Sujan got married there and they're divorced now. And like, so it's like I stayed in the home and started to feel these old memories that I had never fully felt at the time, because I either didn't feel supported or was overwhelmed. And then it was like an alchemical thing happening as I was just with the actual physical rooms. And then ascended masters came in, female ascended masters, and then every room became a temple. And then I was guided to start an Airbnb, and I had amazing guests, like all these people that celebrated like birthdays, their anniversaries, baby's first trip. My first guest came on a boat, like, and I told them a story outside under the moonlight. I mean, so, and then I ended up doing it to other people's homes. Like I was going to help a friend move. And then while I was there, magical stuff started happening, where it was like, things with her family in that home. She had found out that her husband was cheating on her, and interesting. And when she was pregnant, and so we were seeing how that was affecting her son and his attachment to this house, and just feeling the emotions and the grief of letting this home go that she was ready to let go of. But you have to fully be with it before you can move on. You can't skip steps, And anyway, so then I realized this kept happening, and I was like, oh, this is work. This is my work. And it felt very integrated, because I would bring in the mythology maps, and for some of them I did paintings, and that are a mirror for their who they are becoming. And I would work with the flower spirit allies and the ascended masters, and do sound vibration and the psychic healing. So it felt very integrated, and I love that it was like both physical and like it felt integrated. But I was very hesitant to make it a business, because everything was happening organically, and I loved just like, I didn't want, because of my past experience of failing for so long, I didn't want to start trying, because what I noticed is I either like go with the flow and I totally trust, or if I have a goal, then I start getting like attached and like driven, and it's not attractive, and definitely doesn't make for sales. But I got the nudge this year, like, no, it's time for you to create a business, like sustain yourself, like build the foundation. It's to be independent, like to be sovereign, and stay committed. So when I put up that offer a couple weeks ago, I felt all of this, like I did all this like magic ritual around it, like, may I attract the perfect the next day there was like no response, like crickets, and like I could feel that familiar like see, like nothing works, like um for some reason, like, you know, I just, people don't want what I have, or like I'm not seen, you know. And then I was like, no, my business being actually told me celebrate no matter what happened. And also I was reminded, like, again, this is a long-term relationship. I make one offer and I'm like, you just keep sharing, and that's my job. It's just to show up. It's not to judge the results or to see a result as meaning something, as a reason to quit or to feel bad about myself. So I was like, well, how should I celebrate? And I was told to buy a ticket to Boulder. And Boulder had been coming in over the summer. Like, I used to live in Boulder, and my ex, who I'd lived with, Taylor, he had been in touch a few times. He was going through a divorce, and I thought maybe I was meant to work with him as a client for his home. And I had a friend who was diagnosed with cancer. I had a dear friend who's move here, so, and a painting class I wanted to take. So there was a few things, but I was trying to be responsible, and I was like, no, I'm focusing on my business. I want to make money before I move to like one of the most expensive cities, you know. And but that day it was like, buy the ticket. And I'm like, can I have a place to stay? And they said, call Taylor. So I never would have thought to like stay with Taylor. I knew I would see him and that I might work with him, but like, yeah, I wasn't gonna. But I followed the guidance, and I was just like, hey Taylor, I might come to Boulder soon, like next week. And before I even said the next sentence, he's like, it'd be great to see you. You can stay with me. So I'm like, all right, universe. I mean, I can't argue. There was like nothing for me to resist. So I came, and immediately I saw the container that was what he needed. When I came, I realized he was going through more than I thought. He was really in debt and starting some new work projects that were not yet settled. He was in a relationship that wasn't aligned. And his 5-year-old son, was having nightmares, like, constantly. And Yeshua and the Yarrow spirit came in as his allies in this container. It was called the Garden of Eternal Love. It was going to be a 3-month container where I help him transform his home and change his experience of life. But he wasn't ready. And then I was like, then I need to stay somewhere else. You know, like, I don't know how to stay in this house unless I do energy work, because there's so much going on here and there's no place for me. But I was told to stay. And it was difficult. Stuff came up between he and I. Like, I thought there was nothing. I didn't think I needed closure of any kind with Taylor. I was happy for him when he got married and had a kid. It was something I knew I wasn't ready for. But there was something I had been unconscious of, a cord from a past life. And so when I cleared that, I was like, oh, like, that's why I'm here. Like, maybe that's the only reason I need to come to Boulder. But no, they said there's other reasons. So I ended up staying, and I had to go through all these feelings of like, just watching the boundaries, like, because I'm going to do energy work in the room I'm sleeping in just for me to sleep there. But then feeling like, oh, am I giving away too much for free? Well, it ended up that I like slept in almost every room of this house, and did energy work on it. And I, again, kept feeling like a part of me, it just felt natural for me to do. Then I would feel resentful. Like, am I undervaluing myself? I'm doing work for free. And meanwhile, I'm staying in a place that feels like chaotic to me, and cleaning. And, but I knew that was just like an ego thing, like that there's something here for me. If I'm being guided to stay, it's because there's something here for me. It's always reciprocal. Um, and again, that's that thing of like, I thought I was like trying to focus on my business, and I was like, well, if he's a client, that's okay. But if I'm just staying here doing my work, like, but it's like, no, what is going on with Taylor is not a distraction from my work. It's not taking away from me. It is the next step to help me more fully embody um, what I can do to help other people, because there's still stuff in me that's not cleared. And Taylor's helping me bring that up. Um, and what was amazing is I would I would do energy work, sleep in a room, and the next day this person who was constantly saying he's so stressed, he's so tired, there's so much to do, suddenly found time to repaint his bedroom, paint and redesign his bathroom, his master bathroom that his ex had totally used and then he never used and was using as the bathroom with his child. He totally made it his own. And then I was told not to sleep in the master bedroom anymore, like because I slept there while he was away for a few days and I worked on the room. And then yeah, I made a meditation nook for him. I started it, and then I was guided. So when his son was here, the idea was that he would sleep in his son's room and I would sleep in the master, since that's where I'd stayed and I had already worked on it. But my guidance was like, nope, now that he's reclaimed his space, like after the painting and the clearing and all that, it's like, it's his room. Don't go in there anymore. And I'm like, great, that's great for him. Like, what do I sleep? And I was told to sleep outside, which he has a great porch and I love being outside. But I was like, some kind of bed or pad or something. And I started looking Craigslist for a bed and nothing popped up. And then that afternoon, Taylor, after work, picked up, he said he saw a couch and a carpet and he had been wanting to move his living room couch to the back porch. And so he did that. He got like two people to help him. He put it in the living room and in the porch. And then I started to, instead of feeling grateful and like, oh my God, this is magic, I felt that too. But I started to feel again this feeling of like, what am I, like a stray animal? Like, because he started saying how he never liked that couch and he's so glad it's out of the house. And I'm like, well, I'm sleeping on it and all the dogs are all over it. And like, I felt like an orphan or like a stray animal. And I'm like, what is that ego thing doing? Like, I want to sleep outside. This came to me like, it took me to the young me. It's a lot around racism, like that feeling rejected and like I'm this constant like thought of like I'm not being appreciated, I'm not being seen or valued, and it's coming from me. So and then so I slept outside on the couch, and but there was mosquitoes, so then I went inside on the couch inside it, and then my back was hurting and I was like, oh, I don't know how much longer I can do this. And then the next day Taylor brought home a bed pad that's totally perfect, comfortable. So then I slept outside on the bed pad under the full moon, and I loved it. But my whole face got bitten by mosquitoes, like my eye got swollen, and so I was like, oh, maybe I should get like just an eye mask. So only my head sticking out. Then the next day Taylor was like, oh, you know what? I have a tent. So now I'm sleeping in a tent outside. And the day after I slept in the tent for the first time, Taylor cleaned his whole porch. The day after I slept on his living room couch, he cleaned his whole living room. Like, I don't know it's just catalyst, because I'm definitely doing a little energy work, but it's him that's doing it. And it's something about, I think, feeling supported. And like what Taylor said was, I'm hoping to interview him later, was like, I helped him remember like who he is and what he wants and what's possible. And the whole house feels different now. And tomorrow I'm moving to a new space. It's like my work here is done. Hello. So I am at my next place. It's in Erie, Colorado. and there's this beautiful willow tree behind me. And, I was so excited to have my own space, and I felt so lucky. But interesting, like the transition was quite difficult. And it reminded me of how they say like people who are abused will often get into abusive relationships. So even if it's not pleasant or good, the familiarity feels like home. And it sort of felt like that. It's like when I'm in a certain space and someone's energy, that I get comfortable within that. And of course, Taylor and I had history, so there's another level of comfort with that. And then to move into a new space, it feels vulnerable, and it's not my space, so it would be different if I was returning to a place that was familiar to me. But it took an adjustment. And I want to share more details about, I had alluded to this past life connection that Taylor and I had. And I actually want to go more into detail about it because I think it's a good illustration of how much what is unseen or unconscious, the active role it plays in our daily experience. I think Carl Jung said, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will rule our life, and we will call it fate. And so over the years, what I've finally starting to get, and it still takes me time to remember, is when I feel like I'm hitting a wall, or something just doesn't make sense, or I'm triggered or out of control, or the emotions seem disproportionate to what's actually happening. It's I'm getting better at remembering to ask that question, what am I not, what is the deeper thing? What is the actual root of this behavior or this trigger? Instead of going in circles or with my mind, or just staying with the feelings, which can be hard to navigate. So with Taylor, that's what happened. It was just a difficult time we were having, and there was a lot of tension and this feeling of it's not aligned for us to be together in a romantic way, and yet there was a pull towards that. And so I finally remembered to ask what is underneath. And I was shown a past life in which we were both married to other people, but we were in love with each other, and we didn't cheat on our prospective partners. And so there was a lot of desire built up. I mean, you can imagine if you maybe you've had this experience, it's you love someone, but out of integrity or loyalty or whatever, you don't allow your desires to come to fruition. So you just hold that desire and that longing, and it builds. And so I think it's we made a pact in that lifetime. We sacrificed our love to be true to our marriage partners, but one day we will be together again, and nothing will stop it, And so, and there was a cord between our second chakras. And so the second chakra is of sexual desire, money, pleasure, creative expression, the child, and so when you make a promise like that, it's saying I belong to you, and like I'm choosing to not be free because I don't want to forget this connection, and I want it to live on even if we can't physically be together. And I could also see, so one, it explained like the sexual chemistry or intensity or longing, and then also the fantasy element. Like if you're not actually living with someone, but you desire to, and then you go through like years and decades of imagining what it would be like to live with that person without actually having the real experience, that's a fantasy, right? And you don't, and it can become, that fantasy can become better than what the reality would actually be. And you don't know, right, until you actually experience it. And with Taylor, I remember feeling that way, that like the feeling between us was so strong that I didn't understand it when like the day to day didn't seem like it matched up. And it was like, yeah, there was like a fantasy element of like, I wish it was this way. It has a potential to be this way, but it's not. And then this dissatisfaction. But it was like this awareness when I saw this past life of the reason why there's that level of intensity and the fantasy element. You know, it's like, okay, well, in that lifetime, we didn't give ourselves a chance to explore, you know, this connection between us that is real. In this lifetime, we had the chance to do that, and came to the conclusion that like it wasn't aligned, and yet the cord was still there. So again, even mentally, consciously, I felt like I was finished with that relationship and I had closure. Because the cord was still there from that past life, the energy was still moving between us. And there's also another element of this, which is when I met Taylor, he one of the biggest stresses and challenges of his life at the time was they had just begun this really great job that he was excited about, but it was new and it was challenging and sort of high profile. And it's interesting that, you know, towards the end of our relationship, I had decided to launch a business because business money is of that same chakra. And now coming back 10 years later, he's working with that company again, facing some money stuff. And I am launching a business again. And so it was the realization of the reminder that, you know, how connected everything is. Like, that, you know, healing or becoming aware of something in a relationship, in a romantic partnership or a past romantic partnership, can open up possibilities or something maybe that was stuck in the career path. So if you feel like you're like hitting a wall in an area of your life, it might be useful to ask that deeper question of like what's really going on underneath, and if you need help, you can contact me. I'm offering like free 30-minute sessions right now, just to help you see what you might not be seeing. You know, we all have blind spots. We can't see everything. We're not meant. No one of us is meant to see the whole picture, and also just sometimes having someone to reflect with can bring you back to your own answers, right? Another thing that's been coming up for me as I work on the business has been my relationship with my father. So I wasn't very conscious for a long time about any problems with my relationship with my father. I felt like I was more aware of how I felt with my mother. I felt more like, I don't know, I guess like enmeshed or tied with her. I felt like my mother was like the more critical one, the perfectionistic one, the one that I was more like scared of when I was young and wanted to impress, you know, when I was older. And I just felt like she like was cared more. There was like more emotion. So, you know, I would feel more protective of her and more guilty, you know, if I felt like I wasn't being a good daughter. My dad I saw as one who's like more laid back, and when I was younger, like, you know, the nicer one. Although he would sometimes like lose his temper, and then my mom would sort of protect us. But in recent years, my dad has come up a lot in my healing, and I feel it's like when I got older, I realized that what I took for my dad being like laid back or nicer was really almost like, you know, when someone's emotionally unavailable, it's like they're laid back because they're not actually present. And this is not a judgment on my dad. Like, he was incredibly stressed and overwhelmed as an immigrant trying to survive, right? But as a child, you know, I think I felt abandoned by my father. I didn't feel like he really cared or was protecting me or valued me, you know. And so there's been some sadness that has been rising up. And what I've become aware of is, again, this how everything is connected. Like, I feel like I'm being asked to be my own mother and father. I feel like that is what adulthood is. That is what healing is like coming to that place where we can learn to like be compassionate and love ourselves so that our inner children feel safe. And we become our own support systems. And in that way, we can actually love others or children. And so for me, like being my inner father, or like standing in my own divine masculine, is something that I'm learning. Like I mentioned, like when I think about structure or like having, you know, like the normal things that like a foundation, like, you know, a home of my own, a savings account, you know, stability. When I think about those things, that feels like I'm classifying that as like the divine masculine that can allow the divine feminine me to feel free to express herself and be able to go in cycles and rest when she needs to and express, because there's like a security of like that I'm being held. But in my experience of myself, like when I get into more of that masculine place of like having to meet material needs, it's like I become toxic to myself. It comes, I get like driven, it comes from a place of scarcity. And it doesn't feel safe. And so I was thinking, well, you know, we get these ideas of what feminine, masculine means, what it means to feel safe, from our parents, right? First and foremost, usually. And so if what I saw in my father was that he didn't feel safe, and that he didn't have the space to like really be emotionally available for anyone else because he didn't feel safe himself. And it makes me really sad to think about. Like, it's not just that he was an immigrant, because I remember hearing, like, even in Korea, he had this like drive, and he was always like he was like top of the class and all these things, and always like working to get scholarships and go to better schools. And I mean, that's even why he came to the States, to like get an edge. And his brothers weren't like that. So it's interesting, right? Like part of it is personality, or like what your soul lesson is when you come in, because his brothers, who like were brought up in the same family, same environmental conditions, did not necessarily have that same sort of like intense ambition or feeling of push. I'm just witnessing all the layers, like, because I have that experience of the masculine from my father. That's also the way that I've related to taking care of myself. And that's also influenced the kind of men that I attract, and how I relate to them. So if there's a wound there around the father or the masculine, I could see how it's like a hole, right? Where like I want my father's love to be, or my own divine masculine's love to be, and instead of filling that myself, I look for sexual partners or money, clients, to give me that sense of security and value, or even a physical home. And, I thought I had really, I thought I was coming from a place of wholeness. Like I said, I think when I feel very like satisfied often when I'm alone. And I feel that way with my art. I feel fulfilled by it. And, when I mentioned that, like the sort of magical stuff that was happening with people's homes, and the integration of the past, when that was happening organically, I was like really into it. But just like when you enter a relationship, like when you're single, it can be easier to just be like, I don't have any issues. And then when you enter a relationship, everything gets triggered. And you can blame the person for making you feel bad, but it's usually not what's happening. It's usually that the container of that relationship is allowing these things that were hidden from you otherwise to come up. And so I feel like as I'm more intentionally trying to share my art and my work in the world, these, I guess, sort of unresolved parts of me are coming to my awareness. Yeah, and I don't have any answers, they're just kind of observations, and I guess like what I would tell any person I'm working with or a friend, that to trust the process, that it's perfect. Yeah, to be completely transparent, like even now I'm feeling like noticing I want to call Taylor and see him, and I'm like, what is that? I literally have been in his house and was so excited to have my own space because I know that's what I need. And now that I have it, that part of me that's like looking outside of myself, it's starting to rain, to fill what feels empty. Yeah, so one of the things I decided to do is create this video, So let me bring this back to the exploration of desire, which we're still journeying through. One of the things that past partners have reflected to me is that I'm not, that I wouldn't initiate sexually. And I remember at first being surprised because I thought of myself as a sexual person, that I was like very responsive and just like into it. But responding to someone is different from initiating, right? And I remember I even took like this gender kink power workshop with Z. I'll put a link below for their work. They're amazing, and it was about exploring what the title is, gender and sexuality and power play, and one of the exercises was to explore like the ways that it feels arousing to be dominated, right? To be submissive. And I could think of so many ways that I like that. But then when I had to think of ways that I like to dominate sexually, that was really, really difficult for me. Because it's not something I'm accustomed to. And I remember it was very uncomfortable for me, but I could feel like that there was like a whole world in me that I was just sort of like tapping into, and I wasn't yet ready to open to, but I mean, like my Mars is in Sag, and like I have a lot of masculine qualities, and I can be very dominating and aggressive and bold, and so it's interesting to see how that has been kind of like where I am unconsciously pushing that down. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is I became aware recently. So I was working with this marketing coach named Simone. I'll also link to her. And this idea of like comparing a business to a romantic partnership. And when you're the business owner and you're making an offer, you're the one leading. So if it was a dance, I'm leading. And if I'm leading, then it's like what feels safe and inviting, is for the other person to be able to like fall into you, to trust you. If the lead is like wishy-washy in any way, or not clear about what they want, or not direct, then it actually is very difficult to make the dance happen smoothly. And I noticed that, like when in my offers, it's like I'm very expressive when I'm just sharing my art or when I'm talking. But when I think about actually like making a sales offer, I am kind of that energy of like, I mean, I kind of like you and we can connect, and I'm open to hanging out more if you want, but like only if you want to, and like I don't want to bother you. And I remember one of my partners pointed out, like, maybe you are not used to having to like work to build a relationship or to like be seductive, because people like in romance just like come to you without you having to work for it. And I found that very interesting, because in some ways I feel like things have not come easily to me at all. But I could see where, again, it's the conditioning, right? I've been conditioned as a person, a female body, to be led, and to not be comfortable leading, to not like own my desires and voice them, and be courageous enough to risk rejection, and to build up the muscle of confidence. Like, I don't have to take any of this personally, because I'm just being me, and I'm going to, when I feel connected to someone, or I know I can help them, or I know I want to be involved with them in a deeper way, then to just be clear and to say that without, of course, putting any pressure on the other person. Another thing that I found really fascinating was, this idea of like, if no one is, jumping on your offer, then maybe it's because you don't want to jump your offer. Like, what you're offering isn't exciting to you, so why would anyone else want it? Because again, and everything is about frequency and energy, and you attract through your own desire, right? Just like, when you're in love, like suddenly everyone wants you because that energy of already being turned on and satisfied is attractive. And for me, it's like, I am totally turned on by the work that I do. Like, I think it's magical. In fact, I don't often have words for it, which is why it's difficult for me to talk about or market. And I feel like when I try to, it falls flat. So, but I was talking to someone, a friend of mine, who's a South Asian woman who teaches Kundalini yoga, and I was talking to her about this issue of, why is it so difficult for me to just communicate something that I feel confident doing? And she reminded me, like, we're in these spiritual fields and where it's very nonlinear, and we're trying to use language, and specifically English, to describe something, that is inexplicable. And then we were talking about, she teaches Kundalini yoga, so she uses like ancient mantras, and how students have told her that it was very, they love that, like, her ancestry is present as part of what she's offering. And then we started talking about colonization, and then I started to feel my fire, right? Like, oh, right, this is what I get, like, this is what I get excited about. This is what drives me, which is, like, yeah, none of us are meant to be colonized, and yet we are often unaware of the ways that we are being held back and holding ourselves back, because really we are infinite and free, and no one actually has power over us until we grant it to them. And so I like supporting people to see through, to see beyond that conditioning and that self-programming. So, and then this piece of like language, like I'm Korean American, so Korean is my mother language, and even though I speak English much more fluently than Korean, I probably spoke Korean first, when I said like 엄마 to my mom. And I remember I moved to Korea a few years ago, and I thought I was going there for business. I thought I was going to travel and share my art and translate these stories and help women actually get pregnant naturally by removing these more unconscious blocks. And what ended up happening is I started singing Korean folk songs with this amazing teacher twice a week. And that's like what I mostly did. And at the time, I didn't understand it at all. But, well, I knew the way I felt when I sang these songs. These songs to me carry like the spirit of Korea before it became westernized, before it became colonized. And they're so powerful and so moving. And I remember thinking, I need to share these songs. Like, and actually my Korean teacher was saying, you should share them. I'm like, I'm a beginner. I'm totally beginner. And she's like, well, you know more than most people in the world. And I thought about that, but I'm like, who's going to be interested in that? But in any case, it's something I'm going to be playing with because yeah, the Korean language, to me, it's like the language of the heart, where English is a language of the mind, and so they feel very different. And because it's the language that I heard when I was in my mother's belly, and the language I speak with my parents, it is much more intimate for me. And the other piece that came about from that conversation was, I mean, it's interesting that what's coming up for me as I'm making offers or feeling rejected is wounds from racism, right? And if what I feel, I mean, I'm passionate about helping anyone who's ready to transform and like liberate themselves to do so. And I know I have a particular tenderness for people like me, you know, people who are the children of immigrants. So I really wanted to finish this video yesterday, and when my phone just stopped recording video, you know, right when I was about to end, it was frustrating, but I trusted it, that it was in divine order, and I ended up spending the rest of the evening going through like old videos and voice recordings, like things that I could delete so I could make more space on my phone, because I'm traveling right now, so I don't have access to like my desktop. And you know, I just felt like it was this clearing of the past, the clearing of, there were like some recordings with like a man that I had got involved with, that I was like explaining myself to because he didn't really understand where I was at, and I was trying not to hurt his feelings. There was a recording of me going through like a shamanic initiation in Korea with my ex-sister-in-law and her family, and this shaman who was like all about trying to like disempower me so I would give her money and work under her. And it's like, yeah, you know, obviously I talked about it in this video, the rejection that I underwent as a child, feeling like my father wasn't really there for me, just the racism that's rampant, the sexism, all of that, it still affects me. It may always affect me. But I will no longer let the past, the patriarchy, the fucking colonizers, the racists, like, stop me from connecting to the people that I am here to connect with, and that I am here to co-create a new world with. A new world where everyone has a space to express themselves and know that they belong. Because the truth is, life is infinite. There's enough, there's plenty, there's infinite space for each of us. So like, let's unravel and clear out, throw away, compost all this crap from the past that keeps us from feeling like it is safe to be ourselves and that we belong. If you want support around this, please contact me. Links below.